Welcome to the Wednesday, November 8th meeting of the Raymond Planning Board. The Planning Board will come to order. The board does have a quorum. We have roll call, please.
Danielle Stopper.
Sheila Burke.
Greg Foster.
Bruce Sanford.
Kyle Bancroft.
Ed Kranich.
This is a public proceeding, and unless the board specifically votes to go into an executive session, you have the right to hear everything that is being said and to look at all of the exhibits that are presented. Please notify the chairman if you are unable to hear or to see. The board works from a published agenda and will be considering tonight's items in the following order. We have to call to order the new business public hearing, the applicant Kevin Gagnon Jr. and Jenna Gagnon, and then planner communications, which includes the finding of fact for the Mexican restaurant. Yeah, what's the name of that place?
Alla Mexicana.
Yes, a la Mexicana, and then followed by adjournment. So the new business tonight, minutes, apparently we're not up on minutes yet still.
We're still trying to play catch up from having no code officer.
Okay, all right. We'll set that aside, and we'll just have to catch up with minutes when they appear at a future meeting. New business is the Kevin Gagnon Jr. and Jenna Gagnon application for Cedar Lane to be Malibu Drive private way extension. We do have memorandum from the CEO and the planning consultant for the town. Jim, you want to review that for us, please?
Sure. Board members, tonight you have a proposal for a private road application, which is actually an extension off of Cedar Lane. For those of you that may not be familiar, Cedar Lane is off another private road, Sloan Cove Road. You may have remembered that this came, I don't know if it necessarily came before you, but there was some discussion about this in the past in which George Bartlett had a lot at the end of that Cedar Lane next to Waji Yazbek at that time, and they were looking to reconfigure the end of this particular section of Cedar Lane. I think the way we need to take an approach and look at this application is to kind of look at it in three pieces. One will be the existing condition of Cedar Lane from Sloan Cove Road to the intersection of where they want to create the proposed Malibu Drive. And then we'll look at Malibu Drive, and the other piece from that intersection to the end is something that we'll have to reserve for a future date if the application comes forward. So tonight we're looking at Cedar Lane. We got to kind of go back to go forward a little bit with this one because Cedar Lane has to be brought up to a certain standard that applies for the number of lots served. So with Malibu Drive, we're getting up to that 4-lot limit where Cedar Lane then has to be 16 feet wide, I believe, with 3-foot shoulders. Malibu Drive, as they have designed it, is correct, 12 feet with, I think, 2-foot shoulders or 1-foot shoulders. Doesn't really matter at this point. So that's what they're there for tonight. They are proposing this with enough frontage so that they can have a building lot for themselves with a hammerhead. That all complies with the necessary standards. We did have some technical comments with regards to some things that we'll be looking for down the line. Some of that will have to be, we often ask for verification of soils on the lot just to make sure that it is a legit legal lot that has availability of septic system. And then we'll also be looking at some of the stormwater issues, which is the most concerning, as this is just at the threshold of the shoreline zone, just at 600 feet, the very early part of that, and then the rest of the lot is just outside the 600 feet. So we'll be looking at the necessity for phosphorus control standards as well. I've had some discussion with Dustin Roma, their engineer, about the design of the road, and what we're suggesting is that rather than the road have a uniform crown, that we tip the road so that the drainage actually comes back to their side of the lot. This is kind of split between Yazbek and the original Bartlett piece. We're asking that we tip it back to the inland side, not the lake side, so that we can collect all that water, and at the end near the hammerhead we can provide a bigger infiltration where we take everything and then we can allow it to go into the ground. That way it doesn't impact the YASBAC with direct discharge, and they basically address all of their treatment issues on their property. So that's kind of in just what we're talking about there. There's a little concern about the first 100 feet of the roadway. It pitches back to Cedar Lane. We're just going to want to see how that drainage is going to work in there. They presented tonight a list of waivers that they'll be requesting. We can look at that. We may want to address that before we get too deep in this, especially with the existing conditions on Cedar Lane. I think everything else is pretty straightforward. A recommendation for this evening, because this is kind of complex and there could be another application in the future and everything, is to go through this, allow the applicant to explain what they're doing, what they're asking for waivers. And I would suggest, we don't do it very often, but on this one I would suggest we schedule a site walk so that we can all see what's going on and the condition of the existing roads down there, and then come back next month in December, and then we can, go through the final conditions or approvals at that time. This one's just kind of so complicated, I just think it'll do justice to see it in person rather than trying to explain it. So with that, I would let the applicant go through their presentation if they want any, or if you have any questions for me, feel free.
One question I had in your memorandum, in the second paragraph, the next to last sentence appears to be incomplete. Maybe I'm not understanding it correctly, or there's a little bit of additional verbiage called for. It says, by making the adjustment and realignment of the Hammerhead terminus could create enough legal lot frontage off of Cedar Lane such that record lots Demare and Bartlett.
That pertains to the extension, which is the third part I mentioned. That really doesn't apply to this application. And I was trying to pull something from another previous memo, so sort of disregard that to a certain extent for this application, but as we go forward with a future application, that could come into play.
Okay.
Because they are creating this hammerhead on this piece, and they're all up to code and meet what we have expectations for the turnaround. When we get to the future one, which I don't even want to complicate tonight, that could come into play.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have on the board have any questions right now for the town planner on his memorandum before we get into the presentation by the applicant? Mr. and Ms. Gagnon and your engineer, if you wish to make some statements to us, please step up to the microphone and the lectern back there. State your name and address and your association with the project. Can everybody on the board see the plans back there? Would you prefer to have them up here by the pull-down map? That way we can also get them recorded and photographed, for the record too. If you want to stand up front while you're making comments and using that microphone,
that's
so
portable
your
microphone
comments
for you.
can be recorded, that's also fine.
So name and current address? I'm Kevin Gagnon Jr., 127 Sloan's Cove Road, and I will be the future homeowner. But yeah, so any technical questions, we have our engineer Dustin Roma here. But really, this isn't a development, not in the future, it's not going to be a development, it's just my wife and I, we would like to, build our first home. And our intention is to hopefully get the foundation in before frost sets. With that said, we'd like to get approval as soon as possible. But other than that, if you guys have any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer them. And Jim, thank you for everything you said.
Well, there's quite a laundry list that Jim Seymour has put together. I don't know how technically you can answer a lot of the questions that Jim has. A lot of them seem to be engineering issues that he feels need to be incorporated into. Are you the engineer that's associated?
Yes, I can answer some of the questions. I can, if you want, I can get So my name is Dustin Roma, civil engineer working on the project. And so some of the waivers that you have in front of you here tonight, I think it'll be important to get some clarification on some of those items. We had put those in writing at the request of Mr. Seymour, just so that you did have those in front of you. I do apologize of the coming in here kind of at the last minute, but at least they're there and helps as we explain our way kind of through them. Sure. Those waiver requests predominantly pertain to the existing section of Cedar Lane. As Mr. Seymour indicated, it really is kind of two separate projects here, or kind of a three-step process. We're talking about two of the steps here tonight. We've got Cedar Lane, which is an existing road, generally in the condition and the width that the town would expect for the type of development and access that it sees. It does have potentially some clearing that could be done on the sides. It has kind of grown in over the years. One of the things that we could do in this case is certainly try and push back some of any of the encroachments that some of the vegetation and things like that have come into the roadway, just to make sure that if there's any questions at all about the adequacy of the width there, that that can be fairly easily addressed, and something we could do as part of the building process, and certainly prior to any issuance of a CO on the building, that we can address any of those questions as far as that goes. The current condition of what was Cedar Lane Extension, which we're now calling Malibu, that road does require significant improvements in order to provide vehicle access and through there. There is a road that goes in, but it does need to be essentially box cut and built from scratch in order to provide suitable access. So we have proposed that as part of that roadway. The hammerhead, as Mr. Seymour indicated, is there to for the end of the road as a town requirement, so certainly happy to provide that. The adjustments to the road grades are fairly simple to do because of the narrow width of the roadway being only for the designed as a 12-foot travel way with 2-foot shoulders. It's not uncommon to see roads of that width designed with just a mono slope and not a crowned slope. They're fairly easy to build that way and easy to maintain over the long run. So in this case, I'll flip this over. So this was the roadway plan you received in your packets, and so what we would do is we would pitch the road to what is on the top of the sheet here, so that the water generally runs down in this area. We do have a culvert here, but we've got area that we can essentially grade in this roadway ditch here, and in this area, in this triangle, we can do some kind of micro grading in this area to create pockets for the water to infiltrate in the ground. I mean, generally, that you'd be looking to grade ditches so that they drain efficiently, but when you're in lake watersheds and the goal is to get the water back into the ground, it's certainly a reasonable practice, I think, to just kind of do some micrograding in those ditches, and then to grade something at the end of the road to infiltrate as much water as possible in through there. We had already proposed that on the opposite side of the hammerhead, and that was going to take basically the hammerhead area and the end of the roadway and collect the water in those areas and put it back into the ground. Mr. Seymour had a question about the drainage here at the intersection, and we were originally looked at whether or not it was reasonable to put a culvert in there, or how we were going to adjust drainage. But if you look at these contours, essentially these are two 302 contours. There's a grade break right here, where the watershed that's actually draining in this direction is extremely small. It's really just this corner of the lot. From here, all of this drainage, you can see this kind of swale graded in here. All of this gets pulled this way over towards the culvert. So after looking at the very small drainage area that's here, it seemed reasonable that, again, trying to keep the water locally in this area and not trying to pipe it down the road, that we would just basically grade this area as the rest of the roadway is graded as surface drainage, and not try to ditch all the way down the road and send water down towards the lake. We'd have to go.
Again, I think we've read
Okay.
your material, and we're pretty up to speed on what you're proposing, and what you say is pretty standard. I don't disagree with you. but there's again, I'm kind of a broken record on this issue in terms of how the water does move. The waivers, your fundamental argument on the waivers continues to be, well, we're only talking about what we're disturbing. But there's a lot more impact than just the development area. And I think from everything I'm reading that we need to see more detailed plans on the treatment of the water. I hear what you're saying, but we were talking about a deeper infiltration pond. There's a few other items that our town planner has suggested. Again, you're right. The water drainage ultimately is going to affect Panther Pond, which is listed as an endangered lake here in Raymond from development. So my perspective and point of order, Mr. Chairman, to receive waivers the night of a meeting is very difficult for me.
Why don't we have the
Because-
public hearing, and then we'll get to the
Okay.
discussion and the waivers.
All right, but I don't think we need to go over what he's already presented to us. I understand that you feel it's all reasonable. I think the crux of the issue here is the waivers. But again, if you have anything more you want to share with the public, that's fine.
Yep. No, I mean, if the board feels comfortable at this point, then perhaps we turn it over to the public hearing and do more of a question
Yeah,
and
we'll
answer.
have comments, and then we'll come back, and we'll have board discussion and get into, Jim's points in his memorandum.
Okay, nope, that works for me. Thanks.
Thank you. We'd like to close the presentation by the owner and open the public hearing. At this time, anyone in the audience who wishes to speak about the application, please step up to the lectern and state your name and address and your association, if any, with the project, and tell us what you think. Any comments from the public at all? Yes, sir, please step up back there and hear what you have to say.
Hi, good evening. I am Mr. Yazbek. I'm the owner of the property on the right side as you go straight. And as Shayla mentioned, this is going to impact Panther Pond, but before it impacts Panther Pond, obviously it's going to impact my property because I'm in the middle. And so when basically, we just build a house, and we don't want to be hypocrites. We don't object to any building homes or anything like this. Matter of fact, we welcome it. We like neighbors. But the culvert that I see right there, if it's going to drain into my property, I don't want to end up making my property another swamp as it is now. It's like I don't want to make it wetter than it is. And so if any drainage that's going to drain into my property, I would like, the board or whoever looking at it, just to look at it in a way that use it as it is your own property, not just somebody else's property, because we don't have any plan to build any homes in the future. We don't have anything. Matter of fact, there's a plan to put this land into tree growth. We want everything to grow and make it back to its own natural stage. So anyway, I don't want to just mumble all night long, but any drainage or any water coming from this building, this road, I would like it not to dump into my property, just to dump on somebody else's property or just take it to the left.
Yeah, just quickly responding to that, I think that was the point that Jim was making in his memorandum, that the retention pond on the plan view, I guess that must be the south side of the road that abuts your property. He didn't feel that that was adequate enough to handle the runoff from, the proposed development lot, and that's why he's asking that it be considered to grade to the north, so that anything that does not that cannot be handled by that infiltration area remain on that property on the other side of the road and not flow down into your property. And that's something we're going to be discussing and
But when I
addressing.
see this culvert right there, that's going to dump into my property, correct?
Well, it's Jim, you want to respond to that?
We have engineering standards for this, and what the engineer and the applicant will have to prove is that, one, they meet a treatment standard for this, obviously for phosphorus export, but the second part of this is that they can't dump any more water at a spot than what naturally goes there now. So I think what their plan is to control that outlet that does go to your property. It'll go to a level lip spreader and be spread out so that it won't be a channelized flow. It'll go into a natural sheet flow, which just like it goes now. And with what they're going to propose in the future, I think that they'll meet that standard. But until we see it, we can't. But we will be reviewing your concerns for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the public wish to speak? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing and return to board discussion. I think what I'd like to do is to go through Jim's memorandum, put aside the waiver items for right now and go through Jim's memorandum point by point and just have a general board discussion. Under the technical review, says point 1 under lot development, the plan has included the minimum lot frontage. So that appears to satisfy the standards. The second point, that the lots are sold and of record, the board may still wish to see that the appropriate lots have passing soils and want to see the locations of such soil test pits on the plan. I'd like to ask the board for their feelings about that. Jim, is there any undue burden that we would be placing on the applicant by having them show test pits and passing soils on lots that aren't even under their control?
Well, not under what's under their control. What's under their control is what we're gonna wanna see. On their lot, that's right there at the Hammerhead, they're gonna have a building permit soon coming in, so. It's
For
not
the
a-
Gannon lot?
Right, that's the only
Yes.
one we wanna see the test pit for.
Okay, I thought that note
The
was...
Gagnon lot is actually a lot of record, but it just doesn't have the road frontage yet. So
Okay.
we just wanna see the test pit for their lot, and I think they have that information, we just need to plot it on the plan.
The application for the septic system has one test pit shown on it, and the regulation requires 2 test pits.
Right.
So if
Yeah.
we have to make another one, it's fair.
Right, so we'll just wanna make sure that we have those test pits shown on this plan.
Okay.
Just so, again, that we can assure that we're not building a road to an unbuildable lot, and that's one of the requirements for a buildable lot, is to provide adequate.
What else, there are 2 required, so you're gonna want to see 2
Technically,
locations?
there's 2, but, you know, the second one, I'll let the code enforcement officer address when they get a building permit, but I gotta see, for this plan, I wanna see at least 1, and they have a septic design, so they may even have the second test pit, to your point already.
Yeah, right, no, they put the design together, they have to
Right.
know what they have out there.
Right.
Okay. Private road design shall be in compliance with street ordinance standards 4.2 and 4.5. Your comments of the stormwater design is the biggest concern. We've already touched on that, and we've discussed the different methods by which that could be handled. I guess the burden is on the engineer and the applicant.
Yeah, and I've spoken directly with Dustin on this, and we're in agreement, and I think they're gonna come back with a plan, as he mentioned, with some different grading, some different collection areas. And one of the other things we talked about, to your point, Sheila, was also, I just asked them to kind of consider the lot itself. I know we've done some others like this. We've tried to account for that now as well and just show it on the plan, and that way it streamlines the process when they come in for the building permit as well. That's all taken care of, and I think Dustin's agreed that they'll address that. So I think if you look through item 1A,
B,
you know, C, D, E, all of that's kind of been addressed. I think it's not till we get down to even F we're gonna take care of, so. The only one that, you know, might be is G. The imagery that they used is LiDAR, and all I'm asking is that prior to construction that, you know, they just validate that the road grades they're gonna use are gonna be from surface survey, not based on LiDAR.
So that can be applied as a condition?
That definitely could be complied as a condition, yes.
item G.
Item 1G, yes.
Okay, all right.
Then we get into 2, which is, you know, we're gonna wanna see some documentation as to the road association. You know, there's multiple private roads here, and, you know, they all gonna back reference each other. Are they gonna become a member of Sloan Cove Road? And then, even though they're the only ones on their road, technically, we request to see at least a draft of a road association, even though we know that you're gonna be the road association on this particular piece.
Yeah, 'cause the
If something
applicant
happens in the
says in
future,
his-
we have at least documented.
The applicant says that he plans on maintaining the road in his letter of application, but you'd like to see something a little
A
more
little
formal.
more formal, just in case another lot gets broken off in the future, it's been established, and, you know, that's where we often get bit, is because nothing was done correctly in the past. But 3 is where we get into probably some of the discussion the board will wanna have is, Cedar Lane from Sloan's Cove Road to the beginning of proposed Malibu Drive. You know, that's where the waivers start coming in. And to Sheila's point, I do understand that, you know, you did not receive this evening. And again, I'm not saying you have to make any decisions on this, but when we get to that point, obviously we'll take the waivers up first, then go to the rest of this. That may be one you want to just see in person before you vote on any waiver, just to get a sense of the condition of the road and the shoulders
And the width.
and the width.
Now, you're saying 20-foot total width with a 16-foot travel lane plus 2-foot shoulder.
And either, my point is that you can have a 3-foot shoulder on one side and a 1-foot shoulder on the side, but overall, we should have close to that 20-foot width would be ideal. And I think they're really, really close to that out there now. But we need to see it, measure it, and then you can make a determination. The other piece of that is we might just even want to ask the fire department if they want to chime in and they feel it's adequate as well, because that's ultimately what we're trying to do here, is make this a safe passage for the number of units or homes down there.
Mhm, mhm. I think item 4, they may have addressed that on the plan. There's a note about coordinating with CMP
Yep.
for an additional transformer.
Good
Yep.
luck. They're a little short supply right
Yeah, a
now.
little short of poles right now too, huh? And we talked about the test pit location. We've talked about the phosphorus plans. I will want to note, just because of the requirement, what the site distances are at these intersections, and that can be easily done. And then, just like we talked about the private, the other piece of this is that we're going to want to see not just the widths, but we may just want to have a note as to the depth and the condition of the road itself. And maybe
Mhm.
somebody just has to do a small test pit out there just to make sure that that depth of soil is adequate, meets our requirement.
Mhm, mhm.
Or it's close and that we can waive it. We have no idea what we've got for material underneath that. And then, I'm not sure, this goes through the fire department or public safety, but just the name needs to be, verified that it's in compliance with E911.
Just that it's not used anywhere else in the town.
Correct, where there's nothing that
Yeah.
sounds like it, or anything
Yeah,
like that.
okay, all right.
And then because this is a private road, it also falls under site plan review. And I think that these, again, have been pretty much addressed or will be addressed. We require a topographic map with 2-foot intervals. They've done that for their section, but on the existing section of Cedar Lane, they haven't. And it's a reasonable request that they're asking. And again, I think we go out, we look at the site, and then we can make that determination. Same with the water courses and any culverts, and the stormwater management of Cedar Lane as well, because I don't know how long Cedar Lane's been there, but it's well beyond, since we've developed these ordinances. So that section is probably grandfathered, would be my understanding, at least down to where we break off to Malibu, and then probably the other piece as well, but I don't want to get into the other piece. When I say the other piece, the extension.
Potential, yeah.
Yeah. Which was confusing when this plan first came in, is that
Yeah.
that right-of-way across was called Cedar Lane Extension, and that's why we've asked them to name it, because it's just too confusing about what the extensions are, so we've asked them to rename that, and they've come up with Malibu. And then at the end, they'll have to discuss, when we get to that point, performance guarantee explanation, how they're gonna do that. That's just a standard requirement. And then, like we've talked about, just the rights. And just to be clear, the Tolls own property to the southeast, and this right-of-way is their access to their tree, their area and tree growth. This will not prohibit them. They'll still have full access to their property through this right-of-way. It's just that it'll be, sorry. It'll just be upgraded for that section to serve Mr. Gagnon's lot, and then afterwards it'll just go right back to the conditioned road that it's in that serves their tree lot right now. So we're not prohibiting them, it's not being blocked off. They still have full access, just so we're clear.
Mhm.
I'm just curious where this Malibu Lane is in relation to my property.
It comes straight off of Cedar Lane, goes straight southeast, and your property, I think, do you have a full? Yeah, it's just right over the existing side road that's there, Hall Road. Your property, Dustin, do you just want to point out where her property is right there at the end? Thank you. That's your property, and the road comes to there. It will be built up to a private road standing to where Dustin's finger was, and then from there to your property line will remain as it currently is. So there'll be no detriment to you. We did ask to see if there was any evidence of any wetlands out there. We know that the land below had quite a bit of wetlands on it, so we just wanted to verify that they have looked and make sure there's no wetlands over the areas that we're developing. And we've talked about the association, and again, when we get to the approved plan, we'll want to just make sure that the road has adequate monuments, pins, and that this plan will be recorded in the registry when we eventually get to that point.
One quick question, the demare, there's language about demare lots.
Demare lot,
And they're
that's-
not, and they're not shown, do they need to be shown on the plan?
No, they do not need to be
Okay.
shown.
All right.
They're on the next, they'll be involved in the next piece below.
Next phase,
The
okay.
future application when it comes forward.
Does the board have any questions or concerns or points of discussion about the thing Jim has reviewed in his memorandum?
I'm on board with what Jim is pointing out. I guess as a board member, I have difficulty feeling that the application is really complete until we have all that information.
I don't think it's a complete
That-
application at this point.
All the stuff that is my major concern is yet to be documented and worked out.
Yep.
I feel comfortable that Jim says it's well on its way. I have no problem with that. And the recommendation of a site walk to consider additional waivers on the road, all the road stuff. And if we can do it via site walk rather than requiring more engineering studies and all of that, I think it's to both sides' benefit, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, when we do a site walk, we can't have big discussions in the field about what we
Right.
want. We just observe, and we can come back and discuss. But I think that, you know, you can ask questions of him in the field, and he can ask questions back, but we're not gonna get into a long
Correct.
debate and discussion like a regular planning board meeting in the
Right.
field. But I think it'll be to your benefit once you get out there. It's kind of self-explanatory once you get out there, and I think that, you know, between Dustin and myself, I think we've got you, we'll get what you need on the plan. I think we've already kind of considered that, but you're at a disadvantage that you have not seen the site.
Yeah, I think we'll need to, arrange that, and I think as far as scheduling, not the site walk, but any final approval, I think the most favorable that you could expect would be the site walk as quickly as we can arrange it, with the engineering resubmitted in time to get on the calendar for the December board meeting.
Yeah, that's what
And they have to have that in by when?
December meeting. We have to notify the legal ad by the 22nd of November, so we have to
Okay.
be in before that.
Okay, and so if you get your paperwork in properly, and then if we discuss potential waivers, and if all your information has been submitted properly, there is a possibility that the board could accept the application as complete and approve it at the next meeting. If there are any delays in that, if your engineering work isn't complete, or there are additional issues that simply cannot be hammered out, then it would have to flow over to the next meeting. And I know you want to get in the ground and before the middle of December. We only have one more meeting before that's going to occur. So I think the burden really is, I'm sure we can arrange the site walk and do what we need to do, but as far as the burden on the applicant and the engineer of getting all this taken care of properly and submitted by the 22nd, ball's in your court on that one, okay? I think we should probably put off on any discussion of waivers at this point. I don't feel we have a complete application.
Okay.
Any discussion on the board on that? I want to consider tabling at this time?
I agree we should table. I want to say, I don't think we're going to have any problem getting this done next month if we get all the pieces in place.
I'd agree with that.
But as a matter of public record, we have to have all those pieces before we can take formal action.
Got to cross the Ts and dot the Is, so to speak. Do we have a motion to table at this time?
She has a question.
I'm wondering if the abutters will be invited to the site walk.
Yes, it'll be a public
Absolutely.
notice.
Absolutely. We have a motion to table at this time,
So moved?
and we have a second?
Second.
All in favor after no discussion? Okay, we'll table that at this time. Arranging a site walk. I'd like to do this as quickly as possible. I am not in town on Saturday, which obviously is the best time to do it. Does anyone have any objections to doing it maybe Sunday afternoon?
I do. How about before the kickoff of the baseball season?
Sunday noon,
It would
right?
have to be early, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
it'd
and
have to
get
be
it out of the
really
way in
early.
the morning, you know?
Late morning or noon, something like that. Let the sun get up, warm it up a little bit.
Say
Supposed to be
11, 11 Sunday?
Sunday, yeah, anytime
11?
Sunday, I'm fine, I'll be back.
How much time do you need to get a notice? Do we have to put a notice out
How
for
will
that?
be notified for this walk?
Well, we're just gonna go out and take a look at the lay of the land and,
How-
Notified?
The abutters, we have to worry about the abutters being
Yeah, I need
notified.
to be able to get notice out to the abutters.
So we may
is
have-
there a time frame involved in
Well,
that?
it's a matter of getting it in the mail and getting it out to people.
And
Okay.
today's Wednesday.
What's the following Saturday's date?
It'd bring
I
my
wonder if we
phone
should put this off to the following week,
in.
and
Yeah.
that would still be
10,
before the
11,
22nd.
12, 19?
Okay, that still gets us done in time
Right.
before them,
And
so that would work.
I'm guessing that,
8th,
Dustin, you
9th,
can answer
10th,
this, but
11th.
I'm
That would be
guessing
the
you
8th.
have enough
Saturday would be the 18th.
to go on already to start the process for redesign.
Yeah, I mean, we've already basically got a lot of this stuff already, a lot of the stuff's already all figured out. It's just a matter of getting it resubmitted, and I'd like to hear what the board has to say, have the site walk so we can address any concerns with.
Unfortunately, I'm not available that day, but I'm out of town that weekend, but we don't need a full board to do this. And I trust my board members. You guys decide.
Technically, we still have to have a quorum of the board there for the site walk, do we not?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we would have to have 4 people
Okay,
there.
so who can make it a week from Saturday? Raise your hand.
I can, no problem.
1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 right there.
Okay.
5, 4, 5, so we're good.
What's a good time? 10 in the morning sound all right? Okay, let's make it 10 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, November 18th, and we will meet out at the site. Everybody knows where Sloan's Cove Road is, off of Route 85 here, and it shouldn't be too hard to get in there from there.
Unfortunately, I'm out of town, so.
Okay, we'll do that.
I think the major concern I would have on the sidewalk is really the width of the road. Those issues, because Jim is assuring us they're working together to deal with the water issues.
Yeah, I also want to look for the, any wetlands out there.
Right,
Yeah.
right, so the,
Does the board, I mean, we probably should ask Bruce or David maybe to take a look themselves for their concerns for emergency access as
Yes.
well. I don't know if that, they've got a packet, but we have not heard from them yet, so we'll prod them a little bit too.
Okay. so I think we're gonna get it all done in time, get out another notice about the site walk. And the next planning board meeting is a normal notification, so we should be all together.
Yes.
And just so we're prepared, is there anything that the board would like marked out in the field? I mean, it's very easy to see where the road's gonna go, there's already a trail there, but is there anything you'd like?
Are the corners of the property staked with a red engineering stake or anything?
Of the right-of-way itself?
Well, or the corners of the Gagnon property line and the beginning and maybe the beginning of the extension point of where it's going to become Malibu Drive. I mean, all of that should be pretty clear right in the field because
Right.
it
Yeah, these roads there, and I mean, you'll see it's kind of a trail, but as we come in and park, you can see, you know, where we come in this way. I can mark out the location of the hammerhead and where the culvert's gonna cross.
yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that we weren't expecting anything related to the water. We were gonna basically just walk the road, look at the
Yeah,
culvert.
I think all we need, Dustin, is where their lot starts
Okay.
and maybe where it ends and where the toll property line is, just so we have a reference.
You're going to be at the sidewalk,
I'll
aren't
be
you?
there to
Okay.
point things out, but I just wanna make sure
Yeah.
that.
That would be
Okay.
probably more than adequate.
It's pretty, like I said, once you get down there, it's pretty self-evident, but you need
I
to
think
see
it'd be
the
pretty
conditions.
self-explanatory, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. We'll see you on Saturday, the 18th.
Thank you guys for your time.
Just so I'm clear, are you gonna wanna Well, it doesn't matter, we'll notify it public hearing again. Extended public hearing. Okay.
That's what he
All right.
said, yeah.
Next item on the agenda, there is no new business. We have planner communications, including the findings of fact for Ala Mexicana.
Yeah, you have a copy of those findings of fact, and I did find one typo, apologize, it was on the third paragraph. It says the applicant originally submitted for an application. It says major, that should be minor.
Yeah,
So that's just a typo, whatever version you sign, just cross out, type right in minor. Other than that, these include all the conditions we discussed. This has been forwarded to the applicant, Lori Mason, and they're diligently working on getting this done, and I believe
Folks, please continue your discussion outside. We're still in an open meeting here. Thank you.
yeah, they're working on getting this done. They're well on their way. They have requested a demolition permit, which we basically have said, yeah, we're okay with that because, you know, the approval's been done. So they're getting ready to, when they have all that, they'll come back with a plan and you'll sign that.
Okay, all right. But you want us to sign this tonight?
Yeah, let's sign this to get the decision out.
Any comments or discussions from the board on the findings of fact?
no.
Star staff.
I would just like to say thank you very much, Jim, for filling in. This has been very helpful.
Well, this one had a few more conditions than we're normally used to.
I know, I
but-
remember the motion.
Yep, but,
Blah, 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 blah.
we've got it going through, so hopefully they too can get some concrete going here before the snow flies.
Now, you have the original that you want us to sign over
Yeah, I
there.
can send that one. I crossed out major and
Okay.
minor, so you can take that one.
Let me pass that around and get that done.
So going forward next month, we haven't really had any new discussion. The only thing that we will have down the line is maybe Mr. Bartlett might be coming in. I'm not sure when that will happen. There's some legal wranglings with that one. But there is another Valley View, which was an older subdivision. That one might be forthcoming back through. They are currently in the process with the DEP because that lapsed. It was approved in '07. Their DEP lapsed, and this is where it gets a little bit difficult for us. We've asked for an opinion letter from our attorney because it's our understanding that it was a subdivision. It was recorded. Now those lots are lots of record. So we can't change the lots, but we can look at all the other performance standards within the subdivision and make sure they're the current requirements. So that's our understanding. We're getting a letter from the attorney just so everybody's clear about what we'll be reviewing. And once we get that, that'll be included in your packet and given to the applicant as well. But they've got to deal with the DEP. Since 2007, there's been changes to the DEP, so they've got to bring all that into compliance as well.
Okay.
That probably would be, my guess might be a January at this point. But it's always fun to go backwards to go forwards. And then, you know, the other thing that we might want to just start thinking about is if there's anything in the ordinances or changes we want to make. This is the time of year we start putting together our list, and even though Scott's, you know, brand new, fresh off the truck, so to say, he may not be up to speed with what needs to be changed, but through your experience through the year, if there's anything that's come up that, you know, you might want to discuss or look at for ordinance changes, this is the time of year we start that process.
Yeah, I know that in the last couple of meetings, we talked about whether we need to clarify the language of our responsibility relative to the
Design
town
guide.
architectural design.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, and speaking to that, Mary provided me with a copy of the town architectural designs, and some of you may have that in your book. If you do not have it in your book and you want to have it in your book, please let Mary know and she can make you a copy. I haven't seen it in the 12 years I've been on the board. This is the first time I've ever seen it.
Yeah,
so.
it's online, or at least I got
Yes, it is.
I got my copy online.
Yeah,
but-
it's online.
Yeah, but again, yeah, you should be.
Yeah.
I do have a question. You know, we're talking
I got 'em
about
now. There they are.
ordinances, et cetera. It's been more than a year now that the cemetery commission was supposed to get back to us on ordinance and language issues, and we have not heard a thing.
Yeah.
Um,
And we own a lot that we need some clarification on, and we've been waiting, you're right.
So I would ask that we follow up to see if there's any possibility, because we have had some issues in that area. And if we do need to make changes, we're going to hit that window pretty soon. The other thing I'd like to request, Mr. Chairman, is maybe a workshop. We probably can't get to it till after the first of the year, just to talk in general, for my edification, about meetings, what our role is, things that, for example, quite honestly, irritated me tonight is to get waivers when you sit down.
You're absolutely correct. I mean, you don't even have to accept those. I probably should have said that before the meeting.
Yeah.
But, I mean, typically, we don't accept those the night of the meeting if it's minor language, but waivers. But I also knew going into this evening that they weren't going to get.
Well, I think there's always exceptions.
Yeah.
For example, with a la Mexicana, we've been struggling with that for a few months. We want to get that business back in business. I can stay here to midnight for something like that. I don't have a problem. But just in general, you know, I feel at times as a board we kind of stray into areas that are really not ours. In terms of future business plans or design issues and things like that. And I just want to clarify, maybe for my own edification, where our line is and where the applicant's line is and what's kind of, you know.
We had discussed, when Chris was here actually, about having a workshop night because we've got new board members and kind of wanted to get everybody settled in a little bit, but I think that is something that we can discuss. And to your point, probably in early January or February, before one of the meetings, we can have a workshop with, who's our attorney? Gosh doggone it. Mary Costigan.
Yeah.
And have her just kind of do one of her workshops so that everybody's refreshed and brought up to speed. And that might be a great time to also bring up what is our duties and responsibilities with the design guidelines as well. And you know, if there's things we want to change, what do we need to do for that, you know? So that might be an ample opportunity. So we'll reach out, Mary, maybe you guys can reach out to Bernstein
Yeah,
Shore.
Maine
and have them-
Municipal has the training sessions for planning board members, and I get regular announcements, I assume you do.
I do not.
I
I've
don't-
sent it out
with
a
that-
few times.
We get
so
those
I can
emails
send it.
from time to time.
Yeah.
We get them in the office and I send them out several times. So
That may be a worthy thing to look at, because it does specifically address planning board members' role and so forth.
Right.
and
But-
if anybody wants to read it, I do have the manual and I also have it on CD. I can email it to somebody if they want.
I think it would be a good refresher for
Yeah,
the board.
and it may, you
Well,
know,
it'd be fine to have something.
anyway, I mean, maybe you guys can talk with Dawn to see if there's opportunities to attend some of those seminars, but I think Mary would be important because she can get into the specifics where Maine Municipal doesn't know our ordinance and the specifics of it, but you can ask specifics of Mary about certain aspects of the ordinance. And for example, the guidelines are probably one of the more difficult things because they're very subjective. You know, they're
Yeah.
not black and white standards, kind of wishy-washy at best, but you have to apply them, and that can be difficult on some of these things like we did the last one. You know,
Yep.
Everybody wants it to work, but we don't want to pigeonhole these applicants into everybody, you know, uniform looking exactly the same.
Exactly.
We want a little flexibility, to have a little individuality in some of these things, so. And those, I don't know how far back those design guidelines go too, so maybe it's time to, you know,
Take a look.
take a look at those. I mean, that was a huge committee, I think, when that was put together, and I know Terry Dewan was the consultant, and
Yeah.
they were kind of a cookie cutter that they used for multiple communities.
Well, I know, Scott, it's really premature to ask you to, let's hear some ordinance changes. But, you know,
Eliminations.
again, Jim, you've been around a bit. I know we dealt with things like the backlot driveways. There, you know, every once in a while we just run into things that's like, you know, they're kind of somewhat contradictory in different parts of ordinances and things. So if there's anything out there that's been gnawing at your toes or you think is going to be a potential, we'd like to hear about it.
I think the only one that we've got that always puts us in a predicament are these private road extensions and changes to these, you know, private roads like you're seeing. We did the other one, I think was Cornerstone. These are difficult because they were built Maybe they weren't completed, you know, and we had to deal with the recession, and so you keep getting these extensions requested, and where do you start, where do you stop? You know, how far back do you go, and how much emphasis do you put on the last guy to make corrections for what everybody else did? And I'm sure the attorneys are gonna say it's a very difficult situation, but I think every town struggles with private roads, and, you know,
Well,
so.
and my main concern every time this comes up is, yeah, where is that line? You know, do we hold the new applicant responsible for the crap that's coming from behind? On the other side of the coin, I think, you know, fundamentally, we need to protect our watersheds. And I know I sound like the broken record on this, but waivers for that kind of stuff, you're not going to find me on board very often. How do we make that process within ordinance and fair to the applicant? I don't think any of us want to stop a single home being
Right.
built. On the other side of the coin, it's not being done in isolation.
Well, and I think, you know, like we've seen with the last two, we've gone a little bit above and beyond, that we've made them go into their lots and address their lots. So at least we know what's being expanded on or extended. We're doing our due diligence, maybe a little bit above and beyond. But like to your point, is that, you know, the first 4 people in these old private roads kind of got off the hook.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think we can go retro with these things. I think that's the limitations we have.
Well, I think we want to make sure that the standards are maintained, but we want to be even-handed by somebody who they're caught in good faith from something that was out of their control that was done 10 or 15 years ago.
Because to my point, you know, you're going to be dealing with this first section of road, and I don't think it's going to take many changes to make you see that that can be okay. Gagnon's piece will be brought up to code, and then I think if anything happens below, they'll have to deal with it just like Kevin's dealing with it on his piece. So,
Mhm.
you know, and then we've got 2/3 or 3/4 of that road really, which is a lot better than it is even now.
Right.
So we're getting there.
The last guy has to go back even onto other property, like in this case, it would be going back to Cedar Lane and bringing it up to standard.
Possibly. I mean, the good thing is that Cedar Lane will have to be brought up to the 16-foot standard. The rest of it would have to be, Cedar Lane would have to be also brought up to that 16-foot standard going down, or close to that. Depends on a legal interpretation going forward, but regardless, that road would have to be improved one way or the other. Because once you go beyond this intersection, you'll see when you go down there, that road is just a camp road, crude camp road, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's expected if you're building and you
Right.
need a new road to pay for it, but to go back around and all the way out to the.
Yeah, and that's where it gets to be, you know,
Yeah.
and then for that matter, you know, I mean, Sloan Cove Road, you drive down Sloan Cove Road, you're gonna say, geez, but, you know, we can't make them go all the way out, you know, for one. And that's what all these towns are facing. Wyndham just put a moratorium into effect on private roads for that
Yes.
exact matter, and that's, you know, we don't wanna go to that extent because you don't wanna deal with the fallout from that either, but, you know, it's very difficult. Luckily, Raymond, Scott will see this, it's been a slow, you know, it hasn't been that massive push to do a lot of lots, but, you know, if the economy stays up like this, we're gonna start seeing some of these old subdivisions
Yeah,
starting to raise their.
and what's also gonna happen is, as the rest of that Malibu Drive becomes Malibu Road or whatever,
Yeah.
the property owners eventually down the other end, the traffic is gonna force Sloan Cove to do something, and it's
Well,
gonna force Cedar Lane to
The
deal
good
with
thing
it.
is, we're beyond Kevin's Malibu, that's in tree growth, so that's a big lot and a lot of tree growth, and they have discussions we've had, they have no intentions of taking that out of tree growth. Matter of fact, I think Yazzie wants to put a piece of his in tree growth, so.
Yeah, you said that tonight.
So, not that we wanna go back and discuss that now, but.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I
Second.
second.
All in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned.